Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another event that's part of the Career Paths event series by the Applied Anthropology Network. Some of you might already know, but if you're new to the event series, it focuses on opportunities, the job opportunities, and the skills that you might need to work in non-academic spaces with an anthropology or other social science degree. And this is the fifth workshop in the series in collaboration with the Anthropology Career Readiness Network. So it's actually the second to last before our summer break. And today is all about turning your CV into a resume, and will be facilitated by Jennifer today. So I'll just hand over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you for having us, Olivia. So the Anthropology Career Readiness Network, we've been really enjoying partnering with AAN on this series. So today our topic is turning your CV into a resume. So I'll give a brief introduction, then we'll get more into the actual workshop, and we'll also have some time at the end for discussion and questions. Go ahead and mark your calendar for our last webinar in this series, Exploring Anthropology to People in Your Life. This should be a really fun one on July 18th. It'll be the same time. And I believe we'll drop the link in the chat. There it is. So go ahead and get signed up and look forward to seeing you then. To briefly introduce myself, so my background is I was more biocultural and then switched to being more of a practitioner. And I have most recently founded my own business, Studebaker Consulting LLC, which specializes in process design and consumer research. But most relevant to this call, I am one of the co-chairs to the Anthropology Career Readiness Network. And to share about the Anthropology Career Readiness Network, if you haven't heard of us before, our mission is to help prepare the next generation of anthropologists to meet whatever challenges and opportunities come their way. We have a number of resources available to you. All of these are free. So definitely check out our website at anthrocareerready.net. There you'll find our tools for job seekers, which we've also compiled into a workbook that's available on Amazon for only $10 US, and I believe ships pretty widely internationally if you'd like to get a hard copy. We also have the Speakers Bureau. So this is a list of people who are open to doing guest speaking and are also good prospects if you're looking for potential informational interviews around certain industries. We also have our World of Work blog, where you find a number of really great quick reads around topics focused around career development, as well as communicating about anthropology. We also partner with professors at universities, usually do about 2 per semester. We'll pair up with them and help guide them through the process of a client-based class project so that their students can get that real-world experience working with clients. And last but not least, we have our departmental advisory initiative. We call it DAI for short. And what this is we provide pro bono consulting to university departments around how to make their curriculum more career ready. The only expectation is they help cover our expenses while we're there. So it's a year-long commitment where they, create their own plan unique to their organization or their department and implement it across the year. So for today, the tool that we have that's going to be most relevant, and you'll see some of the information highlighted throughout this presentation, is our Distinguishing Resume, CVs, Portfolios, and Bios tool. I think we've got a link we can drop in the chat, but you can also find this on our website, and this would also be in that workbook if you're going to get a copy of it. But we're going to go a little deeper today and focus in specifically on CVs versus resumes. So portfolios and bios are great. We actually do have a tool on our website around how to create your own portfolio. So if you have questions on that, that's one you can check out. All right, so a CV and a resume. A lot of times we'll use these words interchangeably, but they serve very different functions. So a CV, or a curriculum vitae, I believe is the correct, I might be wrong on that one, pronunciation, is a complete list, a record of your areas, expertise, and experience. So it's really showing what you've done in complete detail. So this is, you're going to list your contact information, your complete work history, all the publications, conference presentations, awards, all the courses you've taught if you're in an academic context. and all of your professional affiliations, organizations you may be a member of and have done service with. And when it comes to a CV, there's no page limit. There are some people, the longer your career, it could be up to 20, 30 pages in terms of capturing all of that detail. Now, when you're thinking about in an employment setting, that hiring manager, they probably don't want to have to print off 20 pages. And that's where this resume format comes in. So a resume is a description of your qualifications for a particular position. So what it's doing is it's showing the potential of what you can do based on what you've done before. And this will include, and we'll go through the different sections of it, but it can be a little flexible depending on what you're applying for. But it usually includes at least your contact information. That was a really important one if you want to get a call back. A professional summary or an objective statement, sort of usually at the top, sort of sharing what your goal is in terms of applying for this role. Your work history, you can also include volunteer work as a part of this, your skills and your education. And, ideally a resume would be 1 page, but in some cases 2 would be appropriate. But you usually do not want to go over 2 pages. So we're going to go through the steps of converting your CV into a resume. And the first step we recommend that you take is 1, find a job that you're interested in applying for. I guess that's probably step 0. And then read that job description. So I've got a quote from this guy you might know, Ralph Nolan. Although the resume appears on the surface to be about you, where you're trying to sell yourself, it's really about you in relation to someone else. So as you read that job description, you want to look for recurring keywords. What's the language that they're using to describe this role and the qualifications that they're looking for? Identify which skills and experience are required qualifications versus preferred. So in some cases, they may nicely label that this is the requirements, and there may be a section where it's like, this is preferred. But there is also, if you've got industry knowledge, you can tell which things are kind of the nice to haves versus, what is a specific skill that you need to do to be able to do this job. And, as you're doing this sort of initial process, we recommend you compare the list of these keywords that you've collected and the skills that are required for this role, and compare it against your own experience and abilities to first determine, is this a job that you want to apply for? So we recommend that you go back to the Identify and Rate Your Skills tool, which we shared and used did an exercise around in our first webinar this series. So if you want to go back and watch that webinar, that could be a good one to set a baseline as you're thinking about beginning to apply for jobs and audit your own skills. So the next step would be drafting your content. So we're not getting into the formatting just yet. This is really just collecting all of your thoughts so that you can put them together in a coherent way. So as you're drafting it, decide which roles and experience you want to highlight. So on your CV, you may have had, at this point, like 10 or 15 jobs. So for example, one of my first jobs, I was a daycare assistant at God's Bright Treasures Daycare in Bright, Indiana, back in, I think, 2007. So that job is not going to be relevant if I'm trying to apply for a consumer research job. So that's not something that I want to highlight and include on there. Now, if I were applying for a job that worked in early childhood, care, I might find that relevant to include. So think through which roles and experiences you want to highlight. And alongside that, as you've decided which roles you want to include, describe the outcomes and impact of your work within those roles. So here's where you want to use action words. And we've got a slide that we'll dig into that a little more further on, as well as, if you have metrics, if you've got numbers around your impact. So that was like number of people recruited. Maybe it's number of surveys implemented. Maybe it's number of sales completed. Think about what are the potential metrics that you could highlight. And one of the things I want to emphasize for you, especially those of you that are early in your career, start tracking these accomplishments now. So to give my own experience, I've done a lot of work around fundraising, but early in my career, I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to do this again. And I did not track which grants I had that were successful. So later on, when I was in an interview setting where people were like, how much money have you successfully raised? I wasn't able to answer that. So if you have the data, definitely start tracking it now. And it wouldn't hurt to ask for it too, potentially, if you've got a good relationship with previous employers. All right, so when we talk about action-oriented words, I've got a link here to Colorado University, where they've got like a really great list of alternatives. So what I've pulled out here, this is just alternatives to the word wrote or created. So you can see there's a lot of different ways that you can frame the actions that you've taken with an organization. So rather than saying I wrote a report, maybe it's I integrated this data into an actionable report for X client that resulted in da-da-da sales. So here's some examples of action-oriented words. You'll get a copy of the PDF. We'll have a PDF copy available later too, if you want to come and click this link. All right. So as you're developing that sort of action-oriented line featuring, the impact that you've had, one of the tools that we recommend, and this is also available on our website and in the workbook, is using what we call the STAR method. So the STAR method is just a structure, a framework for developing a narrative. So this tool is specifically around interviewing, but a lot of the recommendations around how you communicate your skills in interviews also reflect over onto resumes. So when you're using the STAR method, you're going to think of like a situation or an incident or an activity that you completed, and you want to identify what is the situation in which this occurred, what was the task that you completed, what was the task given to you, what actions did you take, and then what were the results or outcomes of that process. And this can be really helpful in a number of contexts. One of the things we do recommend, if like you personally don't have a strong narrative in an interview context, is that if you're trying to give a good example about, where anthropology has been applied, and we'll come back to this probably a little in our Explaining Anthropology webinar next month. There's a lot of really great case studies out there. We've got a few of those linked in the references here, where you can go and see other examples of where anthropologists have applied anthropology, and you also might realize that you've had a little more impact and done more than you realized in your previous work. Any questions on the STAR method before I move along? I see we've got another recommendation of Carl too in the chat as well. And really it's about just having a structure so that you're making sure you're hitting all of those points as you're developing your narrative. All right, so moving on to step 3. Now we're getting to the actual writing. You should have some of the work already done with the draft that you've put together of the content, but as you're writing your resume, you want to embed those keywords and skills that you identified in step 1 throughout your resume. A lot of times you see on TikTok, they'll see like those little hacks where to try and get around the system, you should just like copy the whole job description and put it in white, like 2-point font somewhere on the page. You don't need to do that. 1, if you get caught with that, that doesn't look great. And 2, if you embed it throughout your resume, you shouldn't have any issues in terms of those keywords getting highlighted. And, just thinking back to step 1, as you write your resume, think about how you can frame your experience back to that job description. So don't lose that connection as you're working on it. And again, I want to emphasize, you do not need to include everything you've ever done. So we are trying to be selective and that you're writing this resume in relation to a specific job description. All right. So next up, we wanted to give you a few examples of how you could highlight skills and keywords when you're writing your description. So these are a few descriptions that I put together based on a mix of my own experience, but ones that would maybe be common for anthropologists. So here we've got introduce client feedback into the product design and marketing strategy via interviews, surveys, and observation, leading to a successful market repositioning. So in this case, if I'm a hiring manager, I can say, okay, so they understand how to gather client feedback. how to have an impact on 2 different areas of my business with product design and marketing strategy. And these are the methods that they're using to do it. And in this case, it did lead to a successful outcome. Now, ideally, I would be able to highlight the sales numbers or the monetary impact, but in this case, I didn't have that information. Next up, this is one that's based on experience in grad school that could be translated to speak to an employer. So here we've got secured and managed grant funds for a departmental guest speaker series ensuring compliance with university requirements. So what this description tells somebody is like, okay, so they know how to secure grant funding. So they know how to do grant applications. They know how to manage money. And they also know how to stay in compliance. So there's a lot of jobs out there where compliance is a really important part of the job. And this would be worth something highlighting. Next up, this is experience that if you've been a teaching assistant, might be something that you could highlight. So we have co-taught Anthropology 101 and facilitated 2 weekly discussion sections with student evaluation averages of 4.8 out of 5. So this is one where it's, a pretty common experience a lot of people in academia have. But it's highlighting skills. So you've got teaching as well as facilitation, which is its own kind of, I think, unique skill in terms of managing conversations. And here you can see a clear outcome that's a metric that shows the success of that. And last, we've got conceptualized, designed, and executed on a community listening research project in partnership with a local nonprofit to advise policymakers on barriers to affordable and healthy food. So here, this is an example of translating a research project. So for all of you that have done original research, that could be your honors thesis. In some cases, it could be your master's thesis. It could be your PhD dissertation. You've completed a project. So I would emphasize that as as a part of your job description, if it's relevant. I mean, your resume, if it's relevant. All right. And yeah, I've got to click this, but yeah, we've got the skills and keywords here highlighted in blue. And this is just to give you a way to think about how you can embed that information into your resume. All right, so I'm not going to linger on this, but this is going to be available to you in the PDF form. So this is an example of a fake resume that Raul put together as part of one of his workshops, where you can see how this type of experience can be translated over. So this is one that you'll have as a resource to come back to and look at. Next up, we're going to get into formatting your resume. So again, as we said before, you want to keep it to 1 to 2 pages tops. And, you really want to put yourself in the mindset of the person that's going to be reviewing your resume. In some cases, they may have like 200 or something that they're dealing with. So put the most crucial information on that first page in terms of what you want them to see. And make sure to label the sections with headers. So there are kind of standard heading names you can use, such as summary, objective, work experience, education, skills. But one recommendation we have too is to look at the job description to see if they use specific words. So in some cases, it may say like employment history instead of work history. So you might want to mirror whatever the employer has been using in terms of language, and order those sections based on the relevance to the role. So I might be really proud of my master's degree in anthropology, but my education may not be the most relevant information for the particular job that I'm applying to. So a lot of times I put it more towards the bottom. All right. Some additional notes. So again, as I said, put yourself in the place of the audience that's going to be reading this. And think about who's going to see it first and whether it's a human or not. So in some cases, you can tell that it's going to be a person looking at it. Like I've applied to a lot of like smaller nonprofits where to submit your application, you're literally emailing somebody a copy of the PDF. And in that case, I would say that you have a lot more flexibility in terms of formatting and design. But if you're submitting through a web portal, I would assume that they're potentially using an applicant tracking system. So this is ATS. And the best way to deal with ATS is to reduce the complexity of your formatting. So you want to try and keep everything to one column. You want to avoid using complex things like tables. And always save it as like a PDF or a doc, which allows the system to parse out your information a little easier. There are some tools out there that you can use for free. We've got JobScan is one that's pretty popular that I think at some point they will ask you to pay, which I don't recommend. And I've also included this one, CV Wolf, which is free. And that one is nice too because it actually helps you compare the job description to your resume to see if you're catching all of those keywords too. So that's a nice one to look at. But yes, watch out for scams. There's a lot of people out there trying to make money off this sort of middleman role. Again, use simple fonts. You don't want your formatting to be the reason that somebody gets scared away from your resume. Try and keep the fonts at 10 point or larger. You don't want somebody to have to get a magnifying glass to try and read your resume. Use bullet points to break up the information. And bolding is also another good way to emphasize, especially the sections. And be consistent in your format, whatever you choose. So if you're using particular fonts, use them consistently throughout your resume. If you're capitalizing certain words, make sure you're consistent throughout the resume in that. And then also be consistent with the spacing, because sometimes things get a little wonky if you're trying to add a lot of different lines. All right, it looks like we had a few questions in the chat. Is there ever a reason to include something not related but makes you stand out? And if so, does it matter the stage in your career? I would say if it's something that's like really remarkable, it may be worth including, but you don't want it to be something that's like totally out of line. Yeah, so sometimes it's worth including sort of like novelty things, and you never know what's going to maybe catch somebody's eye. Like, for example, my first job was at the Society for Ethnomusicology, and I think it helped that I did my graduate research in Belize since my hiring manager, the executive director there, had done his field work in Trinidad, so we had that sort of Caribbean connection. All right, we'll do more questions at the end, but I just saw that one come through. All right, last step, but probably one of the most important ones is to proofread. The ATS system cannot highlight your resume to the hiring manager if it can't find you based on the keywords if you spelled it wrong. So make sure that you're spelling things correctly. And also a lot of times spelling errors are a really easy way to exclude you. So in a lot of cases, if somebody's sifting through, a couple dozen resumes, seeing somebody spelling something wrong is a really easy toss you in the reject pile. So make sure that you're spelling things correctly. And if you have time, I know sometimes there's like a strong urgency in terms of applying to jobs. If you have time, I really recommend that you sleep on it. And if you have somebody around you that you can ask, have a friend give it a quick read through before submitting to just make sure that you don't have any typos or other errors. And
Jennifer, could I
yeah,
offer a comment?
sure.
Yeah. So yesterday or the other day when we were
Oops.
talking about this webinar, I brought up an example from when I worked at General Motors. We would often have applicants send in their, in this case, CV, to see if they were a good fit for where I worked at GM Research. And my section manager usually got the CV first, and he would go through it very carefully. And every time he found a spelling error, he would take a highlighter, a yellow highlighter, and highlight the error. And then that document was passed around from person to person, and every single person who reviewed the CV would see the highlighted spelling error. And sometimes there was more than one spelling error. So it really does matter that you pay very close attention to any document that you submit for your job application.
Mm-hmm. I will also say if you work with any recruiting partners, maybe make sure they send you a copy of what they are sharing before they send it, because I've also run into issues with recruiters misspelling things. I did want to emphasize too that a lot of the steps that we've gone over here today also apply to writing a cover letter. So we do have this tool around crafting a cover letter as well. And, I would always recommend, if you really want the job, okay, if you're willing to invest the time to customize your resume and they have the option to submit a cover letter, I would write the cover letter. A lot of times it's going to distinguish you from people who are just applying to hundreds of jobs a day, trying to play the numbers game. But if you're showing thought and, relating yourself to the organization clearly in that cover letter, a lot of times that will help you get past that sort of first round. All right, I did want to highlight a couple resume trends that I've seen out there. The first one being the skills section or not. So I have seen some different views and perspectives on this, but I would say yes. I think it's okay to include a skills section. You don't have to include a skills section, especially if you've done a good job of embedding all of those skills and keywords throughout your resume and your descriptions. But if you do include a standalone skills section, I would only highlight skills related to that job and relevant to it, and avoid general skills. So for example, in terms of general skills, I would not highlight that I know how to use Microsoft Word unless I'm applying for, say, like a publication job where you're going to be working in it a lot. Or I would not highlight that I know how to do a presentation. But if I'm applying for, say, like a market research job, I would include, yes, I know how to do survey design, or in that case, I might highlight the tools that I know how to use, such as SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics, that I have those relevant skills. All right, next up, we've got another resume trend that I have seen out there, and when I was looking for stock photos, they included these quite a bit. It's a headshot. And I would say no, unless you're applying for a modeling or acting job. A lot of times, if people want to know what you look like, they can look you up on LinkedIn, but otherwise it creates the potential for discrimination. And in some cases, it can look pretty goofy in terms of having a headshot on your resume. So I would generally avoid it. And if you've got somebody asking for a headshot, I would maybe be a little suspicious about their intentions. All right, so I wanted to include these two here at the end as examples to show you that all of those steps and skills and recommendations that I highlighted for you above, you can break them and also still get jobs. So these are copies of my old resumes that I included for you, so you can take a look at it. This is one that I did, this is back in 2017. So this is like a couple years out of grad school. But you can see I've got the skills section up at the top here, and I included some kind of general ones like writing. Like that's probably not a great skill that I need to highlight, but I guess it is an increasingly rare one. And over here on the right-hand side, this is a copy of my resume that was actually developed in partnership with a recruiter. So this is what they wanted it to look like in terms of submitting for different jobs. So I've got education, experience, and competencies. So I just wanted to provide these as examples to let you know that we've given you some steps and best practices in terms of how to convert your CV into a resume. But, they're guidelines. They're not strict rules. There's a lot of flexibility and creativity out there. But I would also highlight that in certain contexts, this resume here on the right would not make it through, say, like an ATS system. It might not come across well, whereas this one would probably do a little better in that system. But, for a graphic design job where I'm submitting directly to somebody, this kind of more visual, clean format might read better. So I just want to let you know that we've given you some guidance in terms of how to do this. but it's not hard and fast. And also it's something that continually shifts over time. So some of those trends that I highlighted may become more popular or less popular as time goes on. I would also emphasize that there's industry specific sort of standards and expectations. So definitely think about how you can figure out what would be the best fit for the organizations that you're applying to. So one of the things that I realized in different times that I've applied to jobs is really thinking about that audience, whether they want a CV or a resume, because people do use them interchangeably. So for example, I had a job that I applied to that was an evaluation role that I submitted my resume. So it was like a briefer version, like here on the right. And, I got the feedback that, oh, you don't have enough experience. When I was like, well, I didn't include the second page that has all the publications and research I've done. If you had wanted my CV, I would have submitted that. So just think about your audience and who's going to be reading it. In this case, this was somebody with a PhD that they would be looking for more of that detailed information. So for our exercise today, I have a brief job description here, and we're going to have you, based on this job description, write one line for your resume. So to read through this really quick, in case it's kind of small for you, the job description is: we are seeking a highly organized and proactive UX research program coordinator. Key responsibilities are identify, recruit, and screen participants for various research studies, schedule and organize research sessions, including interviews, usability tests, and focus groups, develop and manage a streamlined process for distributing incentives to research participants. The qualifications for this role are bachelor's degree in a related field, example, psychology, human-computer interaction, sociology. So anthropology, I think, would definitely fall within that. We've got strong organizational and project management skills, excellent written and verbal communication skills, and collaborative mindset and ability to work well within a team. And so a few things I just want to highlight before we move into having you do the exercise is, in reading through these, don't get bogged down in all of the specifics, keywords. So for here, really think at like its core, what is the action that they're asking you to do here? So for this one, identify, recruit, and screen participants. So it means you're going to be recruiting participants by one setting, sort of, you need to know what the categories are, sort of the requirements for those participants that you're trying to recruit. So you need to be able to identify, what are the specific characteristics that you're looking for in regards to those participants. And in some cases, for this UX coordinator role, those parameters may have already been set for you. So you need to be able to understand what you're looking for. You're going to need to be able to recruit them. And it's also, there's some contextual stuff here too. There may be already a system within the organization on how they do the recruitment, but in other cases, you may have to do it yourself via, say, social media or other systems. And screening, that's really just doing a call with those participants, or doing maybe a brief survey to make sure they're meeting the criteria of this research project. And then next here, we've got schedule and organize. And I think it's important to emphasize that this is not necessarily saying that you are the person doing these interviews, usability tests, and focus groups. You're the person organizing and setting them up. So in some cases, you may actually be the one that needs to do the research itself. So I'm just going through this to emphasize that you don't need to exclude yourself if you're like, I've never done a focus group in terms of looking at this job description. And last here, this is develop and manage a streamlined process for distributing incentives to research participants. So in this case, it sounds fancy, but it's really, you're the person who's going to send out the gift card and having a consistent way of tracking that has been sent out and that it's been received. So I just wanted to break down those key responsibilities in case somebody's feeling a little daunted by it. And then in terms of these qualifications, as we go into this exercise, really think about an example where you can highlight multiple of these qualifications in your one line. So for the exercise, we're going to go ahead and maybe give you, is 10 minutes too long? Does that sound good? 10 minutes? All right, we're going to go ahead and give you
5 to 10. We could check
Okay.
in maybe after
Okay.
5 and see if people need more time.
All right. Well, we'll give you up to 10 minutes. So we'll check in maybe around, 7 or 8 to see if people are already done. So go ahead and take some time to quietly work and just write one line for your resume. So you can think about which job or which role or volunteer experience you have that would be most relevant to this. And then just create one line highlighting some of those keywords and skills that you see here. ChatGPT, and there's a lot of other AI tools out there that could be helpful. I know LinkedIn has an embedded resume builder that you could work with as well. That could be helpful, especially if you're kind of stuck on where to start. But again, just remember, it only knows what you give it. So make sure to give it a close read before.
Well, the other thing you need to remember about ChatGPT or any one of those LLMs is that they make stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
And they will make stuff up on your stuff.
Yep.
So you need to read it real carefully. All that stuff that Jennifer was telling you about proofreading goes double, I think, for anything that those AIs produce.
And I'll add recruiters to that too. Sometimes they'll try to make stuff up on you. So watch out for that. All right, I think we're at time. Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to our discussion. So yeah, drop yours into the chat. And we can take a quick look at them too. Not to pull you apart, but we can give you maybe some quick feedback. Now, these two, I would make sure you're not like completely repeating the job description. That's the only thing I would say on this one. I would maybe try and find a way to tighten it up into like a shorter sentence too. All right, so we're going to go ahead and open it up for general discussion and other questions that might have come up as you were doing the exercise. Did you find it easy or hard to do that? And you can answer in the chat or unmute yourself, either one.
I always find it tough because, to your point, I'm like, they want you to say that you did this. So I try to regurgitate like I did that. But then you end up with way too long of a sentence and no personality. And it's like, did they really do it? Or are they just like ChatGPTing this? So I think I struggle to kind of like that essence of keep it short, but keep it interesting.
Yeah. And in this case, we're having you just do one line, whereas like ideally you would have multiple experiences and work history that you could kind of embed and spread it out across in terms of emphasizing these keywords. And one thing I didn't mention as we were going through the slide deck, but I think is an important thing to think about when you're looking at job descriptions, is in some cases, the person who wrote that job description may have been ChatGPT, or it might be a recruiter that's not really familiar with the day-to-day of that work. So one of my favorite stories I've seen on LinkedIn is a job description that was out there that said we need 5 years of experience in this particular programming language. And the guy that invented the programming language said, I wouldn't qualify for this job because I invented it 2 years ago. So I would say when you see some of those qualifications, you can take it with a little grain of salt sometimes because they may not really know what they need to be for that particular role. And another thing too, and I've seen this stat before, is that particularly for women, a lot of times we won't apply for jobs unless we 100% meet the qualifications. But really, I would think about those qualifications as more of a wish list. And if you can hit like, a good percent of those, or just based on the responsibilities that they've described, you're like, I know I can do all of that, go for it. I think this is one of those, the worst they can do is say no. And I know it's disheartening too, especially we're recommending that you take a lot of time to think through this, and nothing hurts more than like spending 2 or 3 hours putting together a really nice resume and a cover letter, and literally 10 minutes after you submit it, getting a reject email. So I do want to emphasize that this can be very time consuming. So one of the things that best case scenario, you match the particular job description. But one thing, if you are applying to a lot of jobs that are very similar and you're within an industry where the keywords are pretty common across the board, you could probably put together a resume that's really more industry specific as you're going through, but maybe tweak it as related to the job.
Let me say something about a thing that you mentioned, Jennifer, a while ago, which is
Mhm.
you really need to review your materials for each and every job.
Yeah.
And although some of the jobs may be remarkably similar, they're actually all different because you're talking to different
Mhm.
people, right? And one of the things that you really have to do is rewrite these things over and over again. And here's why it makes a difference. You're crafting a story about yourself. And the more you do it, the more audiences you tell your story to, the better you get at telling your story. And so when you start this process, it's very difficult to do this. But after you've cranked out 10 or 20 of these resumes, and believe me, you will do that,
Mhm.
you now know exactly what your story is, and you know how to tell your story, and you know just
Mhm.
the right words to use because you've done it enough times now. And I think that's a very valuable thing. That's one piece of it. The second,
Mhm.
when I said you may do it 20 times, you're going to fail. You're not going to get the job
Mhm.
most of the time. And you need
Yeah.
to be prepared for that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Job applications are a totally safe space because nobody is putting your failures up on a scoreboard. Nobody is publishing these in the newspaper. Nobody knows. And so it's a way to test out your narrative and, you know, do various things. Now this program is telling me that they don't think I'm speaking English anymore.
It's okay.
I'll stop. And
Yeah, yeah. I'll go ahead and answer a couple questions that came in the chat. So we do have one around a picture in the resume. So I would generally avoid graphics if you can, because it adds additional complexity and also takes up valuable real estate. And we already talked about including a headshot that unless you're applying for a job that involves modeling or acting, I would try and avoid it if you can. And then coming back, Megna's question on how do the interviews align with a CV and resume, and how do you prepare for interviews? So I would definitely recommend checking out our job skills tools on the anthrocareerready.net website. We have several tools that are specifically around interviews, but in relation to a CV or a resume, in a lot of cases, you're going to have multiple interviews. So usually you're going to have, and this might vary between countries, but I would say, like, in my experience in the United States, usually have what's like a first screener call with somebody from the HR department, where they may like ask you to talk through your resume and the maybe ask some high level questions, and you'll have an opportunity to ask some about the organization more generally. And then, when you get face-to-face with the actual hiring manager, in some cases, you may actually be face-to-face with an entire team. And it might be multiple interviews over the course of it. You need to be ready to, one, know what you have in your resume. So there's some cases where people literally ask you to talk through your resume, or they might jump around and highlight particular questions. So I would say be ready and like have a clear idea of what's in your resume without having to go back and read it in front of them if you can. Like, it's good to have a copy in front of you, but you want to be confident about the information that you have highlighted in that resume. And I would say the same thing too about your cover letter that you might have submitted in that case. Yeah, coming to the chat. Yeah, and I would say a lot of times jobs, like, if you're a good match and you take the time to be thoughtful, you're gonna, in terms of your application, you're gonna get farther than you would. And I would say one of the things that's really frustrating in sort of this more digital age is watch out for ghost jobs. So I think LinkedIn is really bad about this. So if you see a job that you think is really cool and you want to apply to it, I would go back to that company's website to make sure that job's actually there. And if you have the option, apply through the company website rather than a job aggregator like Indeed or LinkedIn. Now, there are some companies that will just directly hire through LinkedIn, and that's okay. But a lot of times they're going to have a little like picture of the hiring or the HR person associated with it. So it's also worth, I would say, in that case, to maybe ping that person or the hiring manager that's featured to maybe ask a question or something, just to get yourself as somebody that they're going to recognize your name when you come back through. All right. Well, thank you. I think we're coming up on time. I want to toss it back over to Olivia to close us out, and I'll go to our next slide. So again, save the date.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you all for joining and for your amazing questions and work at the exercise. Yeah, we have one more workshop coming up on June 18th. This one will be about explaining anthropology to the people in your life. So this can mean potential employers or clients or maybe even family members. You can register for it now, and I've also shared the link to the feedback for today's workshop with you, as well as the link to the Padlet and to YouTube, where you can find all the slides and recordings of previous events, as well as the recording of today's ones in just a few days' time. And also link to the Applied Anthropology Network's website in case you want to learn more about what we do and what other activities we have to offer. And yeah, so thank you again so much for joining. Thank you again to Jennifer for today's great workshop. And we hope to see you at the next one. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.